Okay, Gavaldik, good morning to everybody. Let us jump back in the Kesser Hashem to a brand new week after a beautiful Shabbos that many of us enjoyed together, B'siyata D'Shmaya. And we continue with Kesser Shem Tov Lamed Dalid, shiur number 34, Kesser Shem Tov Kuf Chav Tes. And we have a bunch of different pieces today. We'll see how far we get as usual. And let's jump right into it. So he brings Oid Mi'ah Baal Shem Tov, another teaching from the Baal Shem Tov, Bir Divrei HaTosfos. The Baal Shem Tov explains the words of Tosfos. The brackets are inverted. It should be the opposite way, which is Shabbos, Daf Yud and Aleph, Dibar Maskal Din. Where the Gemara says, Hadan Din Emes La'amitoi, La'afuke Din Merumah. And Tosfos points out that the words in the Gemara that refer to a person who's done Din Emes La'amitoi, a person who's really deciding the judgment in the ultimate way, right, in alignment with the ultimate truth, is lafuke din merumah. Tosfos says because there's something called din merumah. Where on the one hand it can look like it's a proper court case, but it's like a kangaroo court. It's like there's something isn't right. It's not exactly emes la'amita. It's din, but it's din merumah. Says the Baal Shem Tov. What does it mean on a deeper level? Ki beis midos chesed and gevurah.
It's going to be totally 100% emet. Even
that's right. That's what Tosfos is saying. That's exactly right. Right. It could still be din. It could still be emes, but it might not be emes la'amitai, right? Which requires even greater levels of due diligence to be able to really examine.
So there's something that more than 100% emes.
Yes. Yeah, it's a big topic. What do you mean emes la'amitai? If it's emes, it's emes. Right? So what does it mean emes la'amitai? That's a big topic, right? But in this context, just on the surface, it means to take every possible factor into account. Meaning things could be true with regard to a certain degree of evidence or a certain number of factors. We're taking those factors into account, we arrive at a certain resolution, right? But the emes lamita would require us to go even deeper, right? Just for example, a person, just a small example, there are others, but a person comes to a Rav and asks a halachic shaila. Right, so emes is black and white. What's written in Piskei Teshuvos is written in in one of the contemporary svarim. You look it up, and this is what it says, black on white. Right, emes la'amitai would require the Rav to know the circumstances of that individual's life, to be able to know their emotional makeup, to be able to know what they can or can't handle, to be able to know. That's emes la'amitai, right? So would it have been emes for a person to just say this is what it says in Shulchan Aruch? Sure. Right, but emes la'amita is even a deeper level, and this is really a deep requirement for a paisik. Rav Kluger writes that's what it means for a paisik to be fit to give psak is not how much Torah he knows. It's the extent to which he's able to incorporate the person and their whole circumstance into his knowledge, and to put those two things together. So that's what it would mean emes la'amita. That's an example of what that means. There's others as well. Okay, so here we come to the Baal Shem HaKadosh, who says, Ki beis midas chesed and gevurah lavin zelazev and chlalin zemizeh. The whole essence of Yiddishkeit, which is another form of what a lot of us have been learning in the mornings in Likutei Moharan. Not like FOMO for anybody who isn't there, but we are having quite a good time. And we're learning there about the synthesis, right? What we call Yediyah and Bechira, and that paradox that we need to preserve, and all of the varied. I said I would make a thing. I didn't have time on Friday. I want to say today, whatever. Bli Nader soon. At some point soon, I want to put all those elements together. But everything that we've been learning that's built upon that fundamental structure and framework, let's say, of Yediyah and Bechira. It's hard to know what the earliest one is, but I think that one is pretty paramount. And then you have built on that, right, the ideas of Ratzah and Shoiv, the ideas of Bitachon and Ishtadlus, the ideas of Torah and Tefillah, Har Sinai, Har Abayis, needing to strive and needing to already be okay with what you have, and Shabbos and the 6 days of the week, etc., 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 right? So all of these are aligned, maybe even more fundamental in a certain sense. Again, it's hard to know what's the ultimate. It's very, very valuable. Ramchal in the beginning of Adav Amarim describes the Shem Havaya, which I've said before, Yud Ke Vav Ke, as what's called the Seder HaKlali, right? Because there are millions of different fourfold categories. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Daimim, Tzemeach, Chaim, Adaber, Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Afar, Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, David, etc., etc. There are so many. But what's the root? He says Yud Kei Vav Kei is the root of all of it. He says it's called the Seder HaKlali. It is the fundamental, the most primordial framework structure, and then everything else sort of fits into that. I might suggest, I'm just thinking about it now, I was thinking about it during Kriya Shema also, that maybe it's possible that even more fundamental to Yediyah and Bechira, which we've always been coming back to, again, in the learning of Likutei Moharan, where the whole Sefer is really built on that synthesis, is even earlier than that, is maybe just Chessed and Gevurah. Where, in a certain sense, Yediyah is the oceanic awareness of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is everything, so that's the foreknowledge, that's Einoid Milvadai Kivshutai. And Gevurah is the limitation from our perspective, where there's a concept of tzimtzum, and we exist with our choice. And why is that valuable to put it in that framework? Because while Yediyah and Bechira don't necessarily have a mediating element that synthesizes them both, Chesed and Gevurah do, right? And that's Tiferes. And that's the ultimate, right? Yiddishkeit emerges from Tiferes. That's why we always say, we didn't evolve from Avram Avinu alone, nor from Yitzchak Avinu alone, or Chesed and Gevurah, but from Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu is the ultimate. I mean, you are their father in the end, right? So you're advertising it very explicitly. So we emerge from Yaakov Avinu. We're Bnei Yaakov, which doesn't just mean that we descend from Yaakov Avinu most specifically. It's broader than that. It means our whole theology, our whole reason for being, our whole essence is rooted in the spirit of synthesis, which is the ultimate revelation of the one, which is able to show up even in the realm of lack, and the integration between those two realms, the Yaakov Avinu's ladder that bridges heaven and earth, the human being that stands upright with the head in the heavens and the feet on the floor, tzaddik, which is va'amech kulam tzaddikim. What's the definition of tzaddik? Says the Zohar Kadosh, man da'achid b'shmaya va'ara, the one who synthesizes heaven and earth. All right, so really all of these concepts are really just one fundamental concept, and it's all included in just a point, in a nekudah, which is this pulsating spirit of synthesis. And perhaps this is what it means. This is why I was thinking about it during Kriya Shema, and Rashi on the words Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad say that Shema Yisrael, we're trying to really 3-4 times a day root ourselves in the ultimate awareness of what it means to be a Yid. So Shema Yisrael, the Yisrael in us should be aware that Hashem Elokeinu, this Hashem, I'm saying Rashi now and then I'll say what I thought of this morning, that Hashem Elokeinu, that this Hashem, right, that is our God, should one day be Hashem Echad, will be everyone's God. It's an unbelievable universalistic Rashi. And Rashi wasn't a big universalist. You have to know Rashi had terrible persecution. Rashi lived in very, very dramatic times. Usually the historical context in which tzaddikim lived impacted their opinions on the nations of the world. It's fascinating. I mentioned this again in the past. It's just this is my whole thing, so I like speaking about it. But the tzaddikim like the Sepharno, our other Italian rabbis who lived in Renaissance times, the Abarbanel, sure, right? Renaissance thinkers, so it was very different because they had a different context. They were able to think in a little bit of a broader way. And I believe that today we have potentially the broadest way of thinking, because we live in the freest society, in the most globalized world. We have to let go of our gullus conceptions of the nations of the world. We have to move into Gula. Okay, that's a whole Torah for a different time. But the bottom line is that that's what Rashi tells us. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. But when you look at these three things, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, so Yud, Aleph, Yud, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem, the Sfarim already say is Rosh Hashanah Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. Right? Hashem, Yud, Elokeinu, Aleph, Hashem is Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. So the Sfarim already say that Avram Yitzchak Yaakov are rooted in there. Doesn't exactly align with what I'm about to say because it's the wrong ones, right? So Avram should be Yud, which is Hashem, and then Yitzchak should be the Elokeinu. Okay, fine. So you have to think about that. There's reasons for that also. But I was thinking this morning, this is mamish all that there is. Shema Yisrael Hashem is the b'china of Chesed, it's infinite godliness. Elokeinu is Tzimtzum, is Yud Kei Vav Kei Echad, which is Tiferes. This formulation literally encapsulates the essence of what it means to be a Jew. This is the mission statement This is what a Jew dies with, these words on their lips. This was the whole life in sum total, to bechin of Saif Davar Kol Nishma. That's why a person dies with Shema Yisrael on their lips, because it's the Sof Davar, it's the Tachlis HaKol, is to take Hashem, which we experience mitzvah in a constricted form as Elokeinu, and then to figure out how to bridge those two things and allow the Yud Kei Vav Kei to emerge from within the tzimtzum. Another formulation of this is the midas. Yeah. Because if there's two realms of expansivity and then limit, so then we can have the illusion that there's shtei reshuyos, right? That there's the force of chesed and then the force of gevurah, and these two things are in opposition. When we're able to allow the oppositional, restraining, constricting force to become a vessel to reveal the light of the infinite, so then it reveals that everything was one, right? And that the vessels are integrated into the system of revelation. That's the whole secret of Kabbalah, which essentially, if you think of it, going all the way back, and then I'll go a little bit forward into a different, more particularized expression. But if a person thinks about the Arizal's understanding of the way that all the worlds unfolded, is that first and foremost there's Ein Sof. First there's the infinite, it's a Bechina of Chesed. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu emanates this idea of tzimtzum, which is a constriction that creates a chalal hapanui, creates like a vacant space, right, which is illusional, but from our experience, godliness is not here, right? That's the vacant space. That's the Bechina of Gevurah, again in a very, very early sense. And then you have the Kav, right? The ray of godliness that comes down into the Chalal, which is the Bechina of Tiferes. So you see, everything aligns with this threefold construct, as far back as you want to go, or as recent, and particularized as you want to get. Another aspect is,
because I mostly say that Hashem wanted to create the world, first create the world with Gevurah, and then add to Chesed.
Yeah, but Gevurah, this that Hashem wanted to create the world with Gevurah is already the second step, right? Because Hashem wanted to create the world with Gevurah. Hashem is infinite light, right? That's no expansion. With Gevurah, but then he saw that Gevurah is not alone, so then he brought Chesed back in. Right. That's Tiferes, right? That's okay, and that's also the aspect of in the Yud Gimel Midas of Rachamim. Hashem Kal Racham Echan, and say Chazal. What's Hashem? Hashem, very powerful Chazal. The first Hashem is Koydem Achet, and then the second Hashem is Achar Achet. And if you see in many Siddurim, if you look at the Yud Gimel Midas of Rachamim, you'll see a black line that divides, if you ever notice, between the first Hashem and the second Hashem. And it's indicative of these are two separate, is Hashem Koydem Achet, Hashem La'achar Achet. So in a certain sense, if you look at these three elements as a totality, the first Yud Kei Vav Kei is Chesed, the line is Gevurah, Tzimtzum, Chet, right, is meaning the expression of my own will and desire in opposition to the will of Hashem, which is only in the Chalal HaPaneh, the aspect of Bechira, the ability for me as a human being to be able to choose something that's oppositional to the will of the divine, which means that I live in a Chalal HaPaneh, right? It means it appears that I live in my own vacant space where God isn't influencing every decision that I make, Chas v'Shalom. And then Tiferes is you bring Yud Kei Vav Kei back into that. That's called Tshuva. Etc. Because all of creation exists in the last 13 minutes. What I just said is really everything there is. It really is. This is the ebb and flow of reality, the give and the take, the shakla and the tarya, the yin and the yang. This is all of existence, a deep wisdom. Okay, so here let's go back inside. So says the Baal Shem, the two midas of Chesed and Gevurah are love and zelazeh. Therefore, they're always in symbiotic exchange. And each one includes the other one. And when they bind themselves one to the other, so something new is produced, which is Tiferes. So when you have three dayanim, Shesed Gimel Reishin, which is the aspect of Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes, or if you want to go a little bit earlier in the system, Chachma, Bina, and Das. He says these tzaddikim need to be soine betza. They need to hate money that corrupts, right? Bribery. Soine betza. They're not interested in this worldly things. They have to be rooted in the spiritual core of reality. Says the Heilige Baal Shem Schus Yagen Aleinu. What's the oisius betza? Sheim oisius shniyos min ha'avos Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. If you take the second letter of Avram, it's a Beis. The second letter of Yitzchak is a Tzadi, and the second letter of Yaakov is an Ayin. That's Soinei Betzah. What does it mean, Soinei Betzah? Because where are they supposed to be rooted? In the frontal nature of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which is Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, which I just explained as Hashem Elokeinu Hashem, right? Which is the root of Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes. So Betzah means that they've sunk below that ideal, and they're no longer reflecting the pure, energetic motivation of Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes, and instead they have their own considers. They've sunken down a level. Again, like we've said, in the Baal Shem Tov, letters are all of reality. So any letter that's deeper in is lower down. So they have to be Soinei Betzah, meaning they have to be connected to the first letters. Then, when these three dayanim, each of whom is supposed to be noited toward a different energy, any three people is already Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, right? Generally, because each one in relation to the other are going to have different dispositions. Usually, three Jews, like they say, 12 opinions, whatever. But you have three people together. Usually, they lean right in on any issue. Some are more conservative, some are more liberal. Some are more. And then you have somebody usually who's in the middle. When these three come together, so that's what it means. Dun din emes lamita. That nasa emes lamita. That becomes really, really true. Who's associated with emes? Yaakov Avinu. Titen emes liYaakov. Why? Because Yaakov is Tiferes, right? So Yaakov Avinu is the aspect of bringing all the different energies together, and that's Yaakov Avinu. That's dun din emes lamita. When you have three dayanim, they hopefully are able to produce emes lamita as a result of being able to take into account the different nuances, like we said before, some to the right, some to the left, and then to bring it down into the center. And I thought of, and I think I said it in shiurim, that if you take the word left and you put it together with the word right, then you get the word light. Right? If you take the L from left and the ait from right, you put it together, then there's light. There cannot be light when it's only right or when it's only left. It can only be light when you bring the two together. That's why Yaakov Avinu, right, or Rabbi Nachman, probably the same thing, who knows, was the energy of clapping. The Rebbe was always, we're going to see. We didn't get up to that yet, but it's in the Mems. You probably saw it already. But in the Mems, Mem Gimel, Mem Dalid, Mem Hey, Mem Vav, the Rebbe speaks about the importance of clapping. Breslov Chassidim are always clapping during davening, clapping during Yisbodedus, clapping during dancing, clapping. The whole time clapping. Why? Because the whole energy of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, of Rabbi Nachman, Schus Yargim Aleinu, is bringing together the left and the right. That's the whole inyan of the tzaddik, is to be able to reveal a broad enough das that's able to take components of every truth and synthesize them. That's what we need today.
If you take the beginning of right and the end of left, you get
rift. Whoa. That's interesting.
It works both ways.
Huh.
Rift means separation.
Yeah, rift is separation. But no, but Adra, that's not a question. That's means there's amkus there. We have to think. Chesed needs to come first. The El needs to come first before the right.
It's the same level of amkus.
Is this Targum holy letters?
There's amkus and everything.
Is this particular Targum holy letters as well or not?
To what?
Is this particular Targum English?
Yeah.
Are they holy letters?
There's meaning in everything. There has to be meaning. I don't know on what levels. You're free to take or leave it. Okay. So, what's that?
Wasn't it just Greek that had that skill of this and that?
Again, relative levels. Okay. If for nothing else, it's just a good way to remember that concept. Okay. This produces Yaakov Avinu Titin emes liYaakov, bringing together Avram and Yitzchak. Yaakov ish tam yoshev ayhalim. Say the Svar Makdeshim wants ayhalim. He sat in two tents, the tents of Avram and the tent of Yitzchak, and Yaakov ish tam is the letters yesh emes. Ish tam yoshev ayhalim, as a result of his being the inheritor of both Avram on one side, Yitzchak on the other side. Yesh gam came asusisa didahava, the kaspa. Right, there are two elements. There's gold and there's silver, right? Which, again, archetypally, even though there's lots of types of money, and today most money is plastic or not even existing because it's on your phone, right? But archetypally, for most of human nature, there's the silver standard and the gold standard, and these are basically, currency, right? Right? So usually, if people come into a Beis Din as a result of a monetary dispute, it's about silver or gold, one way or another. Says the Baal Shem Tov, Kabbalah, silver is Chesed and gold is Gevurah. right? Silver is white, has the element of whiteness, which is chesed, and gold is called, even in Hebrew, adumim, right? They used to call gold coins red, right? There's something, they're darker,
Fire.
they're more saturated, fire, yeah, right? And so basically he's saying that, he's saying the most beautiful thing. Why are these two individuals coming in to court anyway about Chessed and Gevurah? Because it has to do with money, and who whose money it is, and who should have and who shouldn't have Chessed and Gevurah, right? Meaning, the whole dynamic of the court case is anyway Chessed and Gevurah. So when the three judges, right, which is Chessed, Gevurah, Tiferes, onboard the information and produce a din that sorts out the machlokes that was about Chessed and Gevurah, which were in opposition one to the other, right, in its energetic foundation, and then the dayanim is bar, and that's some of the sod of what's taking place in a court case. Amazing thing. Okay, let's look a little bit further, and we'll try to go a little bit quicker in the last few minutes because these are slightly simpler, easier topics. Okay, so here's the next teaching. Kuf Lamed Gimel Tzak Libam El Hashem. Pasuk says that their hearts cried out to Hashem. Tzarech Adam Lilmed Lahargelas Atzmish Yispalel Afilu Zmiris Bekal Namach. Says the Baal Shem, sure, there's an inyan, and we learned this a lot of times, to crying out loudly. Rabbi Nachman speaks about it in Torah Dalet, in Torah Chaf Aleph, and other places, for a person to be able to, there is an aspect of that, to go to the forest where you're all alone, and really to cry out to Hashem, nachon. But the Baal Shem Tov says there's also an inyan of tzak libam el Hashem. Rabbi Nachman describes in Sichas Ran as the silent scream. Silent scream in one's mind, in one's heart, the aspect of Ushma tzakasenu yoidea talumas. Where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is hearing our cries as a result of his being yoidea talumas. Not, right? Because he knows what's hidden. There's an inner cry. Afilu zmiris, he says, even if a person's singing, bekal namach, in like a low, quiet voice, v'yitzak balachash, to be able to cry in a whisper, b'chol kaychay, and to mamish scream, but to do so silently. V'chein b'limud, shenamar kol atzmaisai tamarna, even a person's whole body is supposed to be saying, right? So he says, yes, so let the body say it. That's what it means. Kol atzmaisai tamarna. He says, on the one hand, there's a crying out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for help. That's vanitzak, right? That we say in the Haggadah, where it's a big skula for a person really to cry out in that moment, and there's an aspect like that. But there's also an aspect where a person doesn't make a sound, but it's just kolat smoisai tamarna. And the Baal Shem Tov says that's where deveikus is. Because remember, loy barash Hashem, loy bakol Hashem, kol t'mamadaka. When it comes to deveikus, chanas, tefillah, lachash, deveikus is still. Deveikus is silent. Deveikus is not with a rash. There's times in Yiddishkeit where we need to make use of the rash gadol. That's true. But he says, machmas deveikus, the cry needs to be balachash. And there's something very, very gentle, very tender. Otherwise, you can't have deveikus. Deveikus, it has to be tender. Husband and wife whisper to each other. It has to be tender. It's not tender, and then it can't be deveikus. It could be other things. You could relate to Hashem as a melech. You could relate to Hashem as a father. But in the anila doidi, in that place, excuse me, there just has to be whispering. That's what Hashem says. Okay, the next teaching. Here's an interesting thing. But there is seinu in our generation she'anu b'ma'ata seichel ma'id, where we are really, really limited in terms of our consciousness and where we're able to grasp and hold. A person must constantly be mitboded b'machshavto, right? So we know what hisbodedus means, to go out to the forest and spend time with Hashem. He says you can do that inside, in our brain, is to escape into that reality, which we spoke a little bit about yesterday, Shal Shidduch's time, of being able to rise above our worries and our thoughts, right? We spoke about that, to go to a higher place, to be mizbaited in our minds, to connect to yira and ema and emuna, and really realizing what this world really is, what life is all about. Now here he says a huge chiddush, which is drawing on earlier teachings, really from Mendel at Premizlaner, who was a Talmud Chaver, really a same dar of the Baal Shem Tov, and part of the circle of Bali Shem that the Baal Shem Tov emerged from and was given permission from Shemayim to begin to reveal some of these teachings. Like also of Pinchas Karetz, there wasn't a Talmud of the Baal Shem Tov, they were on the same level, right? With Gershon of Kittov, these are certain tzaddikim that they weren't Talmidei Baal Shem, they were part of the circle. So Rav Meir of Parmajlan is one of the most extreme. In his svarim, some of the most radical, like the Baal Shem Tov sort of was mitzamtzim, some of the light. If you want to really look, take a look at the teachings of Rav Mendel of Parmajlan. Unbelievable. So this is a big nakuda that he says over there, V'hafilu be'es halimud, while a person is in the middle of learning, tov lanuach ma'at b'chol pam limudai, a person should stop and pause. And this, aroused the ire of the Misnagdim very, very much, because this is Bittul Torah to stop in the middle of learning. Exactly, it's like you're in the middle of learning. And the Baal Shem Tov said, well, where's the center of gravity in terms of our values? Like, you are steiging, but what's the learning for? Learning is for Hashem. And we have to maintain consciousness of it. It's interesting because in the Tanya, the Baal Tanya takes a lesser approach. The Baal Tanya says the same thing as the Nefesh HaChaim, which is before a person's learning, they should have this consciousness of Hashem, and then they carry it on. The Baal Tanya doesn't advocate, as far as I remember, don't think the Baal Tanya advocates to pausing. But you see in the Baal Shem Tov, and again, it's even much more radical in the teachings of Menachem Mendel of Parmajlan, Ayin Sham, where he says a person should stop. B'chol pam, like lots of times, milimudai, and to go v'lizboided b'machshavtai, and to reconnect yourself to Hashem, and avos Hashem and yiras Hashem, and then to continue. V'af shemach mazay yizbatel ksas milimudai. He says it's true, there will be a little bit of bittul Torah, because the time that you're doing that, you're not learning, and it can also
It'll be okay.
I don't know. He says it could be, but he says it can interrupt the flow. But he reminds us, the main thing is not the learning. The main thing is the maisa. So we can get so stuck in our learning, that we're disconnected. We forget about Hashem. So that's why the Baal Shem Tov advocated. Again, it's an expression of the Baal Shem Tov's hierarchy of values, or to him, emunah, and conscious connection to Hashem. Deveikus is the most important thing. Everything else is an outgrowth of that. But we shouldn't have one without the other. Let's go a little bit. Yeah.
There was one I heard a yeshiva from one of the Rabbanim. There was one, I can't remember, one of the Hasidic Rabbanim used to, whenever he was learning, he would say like Beis Hillel Omer, or whatever, and he would say Hakadosh Baruch Hu Omer. Any time a Rav says something in the Gemara, says something.
Hashem is saying this.
Yeah.
And that way he would probably bring Hashem into the dialogue. Beautiful. Go to 8 side. Okay. Let's finish up. Yachshav kodem atfilu shuhu muchan lamas. He says before a person davens, he has to think, I'm ready to be meiser nefesh now in davening. Chazal say, and then Nefesh HaChaim also brings this in Shar Beis, Rabbi Nachman quotes this in the 90s of Tinyana, the Torahs of Tzadi, which are all about tefillah. I can't remember exactly which, Tzadik Hey, Tzadik Vav, same exact thing. That a person, when he's davening, should be mesim nafshe b'chapai. He should put his heart in his soul in his hand. And then Nefesh HaChaim and Rabbi Nachman both say that a person should literally feel like they're hanging on to life by a thread. Like they're so mevatel every aspect of the reality around us, and we're so misbainin in Shemana Esrei on ein oid movadai that it's ki'ilu, I'm dead. Like there's nothing else but me and Hashem. The whole world is an illusion. And that's one of the times that is sanctioned by the Nefesh HaChaim for being misbainin fully in this reality that there is nothing else but HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? Now the Baal Tanya takes a much more liberal approach, which is the way of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. And the Baal Tanya says many times a day a person can stop and orient themselves toward this reality and root themselves, anchor themselves in the truth that this whole thing is an illusion. Now Shachayim, was scared by that because all of a sudden all the distinctions between Kodesh and Chol begin to fall apart, but everything is Einag Mavadai. And obviously again there's a happy medium right between them. But this was the push and the pull of the Misnagdim and the Hasidim largely around this Inyan. Even though they both agreed that was the ontological reality of Einod Mavadai, everybody knew that Simsim Loika Pshutai. Right? They knew that was true, at least on Nefesh HaChaim, the Gemara there's a conversation about. But certainly on the level of Rav Chaim Volozhiner, it was for sure true that he also felt that it's true that really everything is Hashem and everything's an illusion. The question is, how deeply should we anchor ourselves in that reality? But even the Nefesh HaChaim that says that we can only do that at 3 times, which is during Kriya Shema, and when when a person is in danger, right? So that's a big skula to just meditate on Einod Mavadai. Holds the third time is in tefillah. Person has to go into that zone. There's nothing else but Hashem. V'yesh mechavnin kol kach ad she'api derech hateva hayachal lamas b'chamisha shisha tevas. He says there were some tzaddikim who are able to do this so greatly that they could actually die, like 6 words into tefillah, like Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Elokei Avosseinu Avram, and they're dead, all right, because they're so disconnected from their bodies. So obviously most of us are not on that madrega, right? But a little bit to have this on our minds. I'm ready to just be nullified like a spark in the torch or a drop in the ocean. So says the Baal Shem Tov, it's a big eitzah. If a person goes with this thought, so then how could a person daven with that consciousness while still trying to impress someone else? It's impossible. Because the whole premise of the tefillah is that I'm ready to die. So if I'm ready to die, then there's no covet, I'm dead, right? So there's no one else in the room that I should impress, because there's no one else. Because in this moment, all there is me and Hashem, and I'm willing, ready, and perhaps able on some level to leap into that oceanic reality where none of this is real. So how could it be that if a person has that machshava at the same time, they're davening for covet? Efshar. These are contradictory. Kivin shabadaitu lamas, because the person already decided in their mind that they're ready to go. Afilu achar kama tevas, even a few words in, ve'emes shu chesed gadol. He says it's a huge kindness. Hashem is rechnaisin koyachol mashal matfilah v'uchai. He says that every time we come out of tefillah, it's like you should make berachos and goyim, like you survive Shemana Esrei. It's a huge chesed from Hashem that Hashem gives us the ability to get through a davening, even though on a neshama level we're ready to go up and out. So Hashem should help us to remember this kavanah before we begin to daven. Hashem should help us that we, during our learning, should anchor ourselves in one way or another, different techniques, to remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the main thing. Hashem should give us the strength to be able to communicate with Hashem in a way of deveikus, calmly, in a still, silent voice. And going back to the beginning, this very, very deep idea about the whole entire reality really is founded on these 2 pillars, Chessed and Gevurah, and our ability to synthesize both body and soul, Yediyah and Bechira, Shtadlus and Bitachon, and so on and so forth, to reveal the light of the infinite, even within the vessels of limitation. Thank you so much. Have a
מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני